this video, we're going to look at the administration and management of timecards in NIM. Timecards could be managed at the studio level as well as the job level. In this case, we're going to start with the job timecards and then move up to see the view of the studio timecards. So first, we're in a job and we're going to open up the production menu and go to timecards. Here we can see several graphs, including a time breakdown per time type. We have standard, sick, PTO, admin, and unpaid, as well as overtime and double time. Now these time types for sick, PTO, admin, and unpaid, those are custom time types, and you can add your own time types as needed. Additionally, we have charts for hours per user type, and as well as hours per location. And if you hover over any of these charts, you'll actually get an indicator that shows you the current breakdown for the date that you are hovering over. Now, when you're in a job, these charts are actually showing you the full range of all time cards that have been submitted to that job, irrespective of the start and end date of that job. So if somebody submits a time card outside of the job start and end date, it's still going to show up here. And that's actually a great way to see that. If all of your time cards end somewhere over here and all of a sudden you got this one outlier, you'll know something's up and you got to go take a look at it. Now, moving over to our calendar view, I'm actually going to go ahead and back this date up because this job was done quite a while ago. Here we can see all of the time cards that have been submitted for the job in this current month. Now, the color coding is an indication of the submission status of those time cards, where gray means that the time card has not been submitted for approval, orange means it has been submitted for approval, green means it has been approved, and red means it has been disputed. Now I can click on any one of these time cards and see the information for these individual time cards. Clicking on the time card that has been submitted for approval, if I do have the rights to approve time cards, I can actually approve or dispute this time card directly from this location. In this case, if I wanted to dispute this time card, I can enter a reason for the dispute and click dispute, and it will actually send an email with the dispute reason to that person, and at that point in time, the person who owns the time card will have to make the changes to the time card and resubmit it for approval. My other option is to go ahead and approve this time card. Now, if I approve this time card, this will lock this time card for all further changes. Hovering over the approval, I can actually see when the time card was submitted, who was submitted by, as well as who approved the time card and the approval time. Now, these time cards can be viewed by month, week, or day. And you can also filter the time cards by their approval status. So if I wanted to find all time cards that were submitted but have not been approved yet, I can quickly filter that here. Or if I wanted to find all the time cards that someone hasn't submitted yet, I can do that. Same thing with all time cards that have been disputed as well as approved. Now, moving over to our time cards grid, here we see the full list of all time cards in the system. Now, we can use a number of the grid tools to actually work with this grid, including show and hide certain columns as needed. And we can also filter columns. So in this case, let's say I wanted to find all of my time cards that were submitted to lighting tasks. I can type in light and I can quickly filter those. And I can also add additional filtering in other columns as well. We also have a quick filter that allows us to search. So for example, if I wanted to search for all of my time cards, I can go ahead and do that here. Now I can click on any one of these time cards and see the time card information. If I have permissions to edit someone else's time cards, I could also edit and update that information in case, for example, you may need to modify their overtime or double time amounts. Now, modifying the overtime and double time quantities is only available when a user is using a rate type of hourly, day rates, or fixed rates. If the user's rate type is set to use payroll rules, the rules use a combination of conditions to determine overtime and double time over the span of a pay period and cannot be individually set. Now, if I needed to modify a group of time cards, say for example, these three here, I can multi-select across multiple time cards and edit them. And you'll see here, only modified fields will be updated on these selected time cards. So if I did want to make a change here, if I wanted to add a description to all of these, I could do so, and that would be applied to all of these selected time cards. You'll notice when selecting time cards that have mismatching values, those items will actually be expressed with the 3 dashes. Now, any item that has 3 dashes, only the fields that you modify will be changed. Just as in our calendar view, we can filter by certain approval statuses as well to just see those time cards of that particular status. And we have additional tools here that allows us to individually add a time card. Now we can add a time card and select the date that the time card is for, as well as select a user. Now this is the list of users on the crew of this particular job because we are in a job. When adding a new time card, it is going to use the settings that you used previously to create the last time card. I can also add a range of time cards. I can select a range of dates that I want to create time cards for, and I have the option to exclude certain dates. So for example, if I'm spanning over a weekend, I could exclude Saturdays and Sundays. And lastly, from this view, I have the option to export all of my time card records to Excel to use outside of NIM. Now, the export to Excel does take into account any current filtering that is applied to this view. So for example, if you wanted to export all time cards for freelancers, you could filter this employment column by freelance and then click the export to Excel button, and only those selected rows would be exported. One additional option with the multi-select is that you can multi-select a range of time cards, for example, these unsubmitted time cards, and I could submit them all at once as a batch group as well. So when you're doing this across multiple users, this is a great way to select a group of users and just do a single submit for all of them. Now moving on to the day view. The day view is really great for seeing who is not doing their time cards. So when we're looking at the day view, it is essentially a heat map of time card entries. So in this case, we see a lot of these people were not doing time cards, and then we have these time card entries coming in on various dates. Now you can see here the cells have different colors, and those denote regular time versus overtime as well as double time. And let's go to the next month here, and we can actually see more variation now. So these are some regular time cards. These light blue ones are overtime, and these darker blue are going into double time. Now additionally, this item here that has this orange tick in the corner, that actually means that this day has 2 time cards on 2 different jobs, and at least one of those time cards is going into overtime. So I can click on that cell and actually view the time cards for that user. Now these darkened ones, you can see these are actually on different jobs, and you can view that by the current assignment here. This time card is the time card that is actually currently allocated to this job. And the reason why we call that out is that sometimes the last time card created is not necessarily the one for the job that needs to pick up the overtime. There might have been reasons earlier in the day that pushed this current job later that were unexpected, and maybe you want to attribute the overtime to that job that was potentially done first. This way we can identify those dates and time cards and allow you to manually modify them as needed. This indicator here is actually saying that this time card does not exist inside this job. Now for any other date, you can always go in, view the time cards, modify them as needed. You could even create new time cards from here by selecting a date, and depending upon which row you choose, that is the user that will be selected, and you can go ahead and add time card, and we'll add a new time card for that user on that day. In addition to viewing the current crew, you can actually filter this by staff users or freelance users. We can view only users that are enabled. We also have the option to only view users with time cards, so you can remove all the people that have not entered any time cards in this current view. And we can also filter by keywords. So for example, if I wanted to find all of my CG artists, or by user group, in this case, I'll filter by all the people in my animators group, and I can also search by individual users if needed. Now this information is available in this heat map, but it is also available in a list where we have the per day totals for each individual user for each of their different time types, as well as their overtime and double time, along with, again, the total hours per day. Now this information is also filterable and exportable to Excel. Lastly, in this view, we can come over to the crew and see the overall totals per crew member for the job. And again, with broken down by time types and the total hours and any adjusted hours. Now, adjusted hours would come into play if someone was using payroll rules, because there might be a rule that guarantees somebody X number of hours. Maybe you have a guaranteed minimum 8-hour day. So somebody entered a time card of 6 hours and their time card was automatically adjusted to 8 because they were guaranteed those 8 hours. And if that was the case, you would see a difference in those times here. Now, in addition to our filtering, this grid does have some additional information. So for example, I could show employment here, and then I can group by that employment. And so if I wanted to see these items grouped by employment, or actually any column header here whatsoever, I can actually just go ahead and drag that out and drag this employment up to the grouping bar here. I'll do that one more time so you can see. So we've got employment here. I can grab that, drag it up to this grouping bar. You'll get an indicator over here on the left to let you know that you're dragging it into the right place. When I drop that, this is now grouped by those. And again, I can click on these headers to collapse them as needed. Now, one other thing to note when working inside of a job with time cards is that the time does appear on tasks. So if you're assigning tasks to your users, and those users are entering time cards and allocating those time cards to assigned tasks, you see that information right here at the task level. When we're looking at our list view, we're currently seeing 49 of 80 hours. So if I click on this task, we can see that actual hours entered in time cards is 49. Our estimated hours on this task was 80, and we can see the overall progress of 61.25%. And that is our actual hours as compared to our estimated hours. Now, this information is also available on our task grid, where we can see our actual hours. And again, these are the hours coming from our time cards that are allocated to these assigned tasks. And another reason why allocating time towards assigned tasks is important is this information also trickles into our actualization. Here we have a bid item for CG. First, we can see the total amount bid. We can see our estimated hours on those tasks. But again, then we can see the combined total of actual hours coming into those tasks from our time cards. And this allows us to calculate the overall actual cost based off of our crew rates. Now, I can also go into my tasks and see per task type how much time was actually spent versus our estimated hours and what that cost is based off of our crew costs. And additionally, I can come down and see my cost per asset and cost per task for each of my shot with my shot totals as well as my show cost totals. So allocating time cards to assigned tasks provides all of this additional information for you when you are doing your job actuals. Now let's move up and look at our studio time cards. Here you can see we're defaulting to our current date range, but we can use this filter up here to the right to back this time up. And I'm going to back this up to where my data is. So I'm going to back this up to 2018. And then I'm going to set my start date to the beginning of February as well. And this is what's great about the fact that you have all of your historical information in NIM. So you can view previous years of data. You can compare last year to previous years. We want you to contain all of this information here to understand how your studio is evolving and changing over time. Again, we have similar charts here showing their time breakdown. However, this is now for all users in your studio. We've got our hours per user type. And again, user types are things that are defined by you in the admin section of NIM. So you can create as many organizational items as needed. And then we also have hours per location, so you can see how these hours are stacking up. Now, one feature in these grids that we didn't look at before is you can actually click on these names and hide different sections. So here I can just look at Los Angeles, or I can compare Los Angeles to New York, or I can independently look at New York, or look at New York versus London, any combination you wish. And that's true of any of these other grids here. So for example, if I just wanted to see how much overtime and double time we were doing, I can see that here. And then I can turn all of this back on. Now moving over to our calendar view, this works essentially the same way that we saw inside of the job, only now we're looking at all the different users across the entire studio, all of their different assignment statuses, all of their different submission statuses, and I can click on any one of these and make changes. Now, because there are so many people across the entire studio, I can actually click on this button at the bottom here, and that'll load the day view with all of the time cards inside this view with summaries for each. So I can work on this on a day-by-day basis if needed. Now, moving over to our time card list, this has the same features that we saw inside of the job. But again, this is across all jobs, and we can filter out by job number, by individual users, and it will show all the time cards for that user across all jobs. Whereas when we were in the job, we were only looking at job-specific information. All of the functionality that we had previously we're able to do here, including adding time cards, adding a range, submitting time cards, as well as exporting to Excel. Now, when we submit time cards, we have the option to submit selected. So I could have selected a range of time cards here. We can also submit time cards on a weekly basis. So we can choose a date range, and the view will show me all of the time cards that fall within that range. And then I can choose which user to submit those to. And then I also have the option to submit per pay period. So I can choose a particular pay period, and the view will show me all of the time cards that fall within that pay period, and I can submit those to that user. And just as before, we can export any filtered data to Excel. Now, moving on to our day view, this is where some of these filters really comes into play, because in our case, we have 539 users in our system. First, I'm only going to look at the users with time cards. So I can see all of the time cards coming into the system. I can pick and choose which days I want to view. I get to add time cards for individual users on any particular day. And again, I can see which time cards have overlapping jobs on the same day. All of our same filtering rules apply. We can filter by keywords, groups, search individual users. I can also view this as a list of all users with their totals per day and export that information out to Excel. And lastly, we have the sum total of users throughout the entire studio. We can show columns that weren't previously available. We can extend this, and let's say I wanted to filter by just my staff. I can filter by just those individual items there to see all of the staff within that time period. If I want to clear that filter, I just go back into that column and click clear, and all of my users are returned. Now again, we're seeing all of our different time types. Any time type that is listed as non-billable, which means that it does not go against your actuals, does have a darker gray column, so you can quickly identify those times. Now lastly, we've got our total hours as well as our adjusted hours for all of our users. And that is an overview of managing time cards at the studio level as well as at the job level. For more information, please refer to the NIM documentation. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email us at support@nim-labs.com. Thank you.